Everybody inside the Parisi Palace Hive of 2919 East Broadway. This is the Jake Feinberg Show on Power Talk 1210 KEVT, Sahuarita, Tucson. Thank you so much for making us part of your day today. My show revolves around the 4 L's: leadership, love, life, and lineage, and the ongoing story of real music made by real artists. A barefoot boy descends on this earth, destined to play his axe. It could be electric or made of wood, but it's his tone and alacrity on his axe that makes him fond of all music. My guest today is connected with free spirits all over the world, communicating and transcending through the universal language of music. He has lived an authentic jazz life, which was modeled for him by Diz, Monk, and Bird, and guitarists like Gene Bertoncini, Toots Thielsman, and Chuck Wayne. My guest has collaborated with some of the heaviest leaders in music history. He himself is a leader, be it in a live setting with Bernard Pretty Purdy and Chuck Rainey, across the Atlantic with Philip Catherine, or playing spiritual music of the highest order with Mike Mandel and Alphonse Mouzon. Live from Florida, Larry Coryell, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Oh, hey, hello, Jake.
How are you?
Nice intro.
Just short and sweet. How you doing, man?
Good, man. I'm doing good, thank you.
You know, Larry, I have to talk to you. We were talking off air yesterday, but for my audience and for my generation, younger generations, you used the word the jazz life yesterday, and I was hoping you could personalize it and talk about when you were coming up, when you felt like you started to live the jazz life.
Well, I would say it started when I was in high school, and I discovered the music itself through one of my teachers, one of my guitar teachers, and it was a music that I did not understand at that time. I didn't know what it was, but I certainly wanted to learn how to play it. And that life, the jazz life, consists of the pursuit of that desire to learn how to play that music and to understand why it is so important and why it is so significant.
Can you, why is it so important and why is it so significant?
Well, it's important because it's America's only indigenous art form. That's important, and it's significant because it's so difficult to play and difficult to understand. If you don't understand it, you can't play it.
In high school at that point, were you playing like just like folk music? What? How would you say?
I was basically exposed to what was being played on the radio. You know, basically what was being played on the radio, which was popular music, a lot of interesting stuff back in the 50s, a lot of schlock. But I also heard a lot of country and western music, and one of the things about that was a lot of the country and western records had some great guitar playing on it, and I didn't know that most of that great guitar playing came from Chet Atkins.
Right.
So that's one of the first records I ever bought was a Chet Atkins record.
Yeah, right on. A lot of people don't. This is not the guitar, but I interviewed Herb Albert a few weeks ago, and a lot of the piano playing on the Baja Marimba Band stuff was actually Pete Jolly. You know, it's just you never really realize some of the. But you were hearing Chet on the radio, and then you wound up going and buying the vinyl records. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So, what was the first jazz? Well, first of all, when did that term even come into your vernacular, and what does that term mean to you?
Well, it meant a form of music that was harmonically complex and very beautiful and very. It was a work of art. I remember the first time I heard a solo by Wes Montgomery. It was just it was so beautiful, but I didn't understand it. and at the same time, I really loved it. I wanted to know what it was.
Talking to Larry Coryell here from Florida. When you talk about America's only indigenous music, I've talked to so many cats about the origins of the word jazz, and where do you believe it's not just the only indigenous American music, but is it a Black American music?
It's African. It's African based. It's definitely an African phenomenon. But you don't have to be African American to play it, but you have to understand that it comes from that culture.
Can you be more specific about how it's African based?
Well, it's derived from the way Black people hear music, and from the way they compose forms like work songs and hollers and field hollers, and ultimately it evolved into the blues, and the blues was pretty much the foundation of all the forms in jazz that became expressed by composers like Billy Strayhorn and Duke Ellington, etc., Fletcher Henderson, etc. But it was not just a blues like people might think of the blues as, I don't know, B.B. King or something relatively simple. And the blues evolved out of a very long period of suffering by African American people, and then it was like out of a muddy, wet, dank swamp of culture.
Yeah.
These beautiful flowers from that, they were fertilized by that life of complexity and difficulty, and these beautiful flowers of music that were original. These things, they grew forth out of that mud and gave us great, like a lotus flower. Billy Strayhorn,
right.
All that stuff. A flower is a lovesome thing, or all those other great Billy Strayhorn things like Lush Life, etc. All the collaborations with Ellington, some beautiful stuff.
Like you were talking about, people don't think of the blue. You like, okay, not the blues like B.B. King, like on the traditional 1-4-5 blues scale. They were playing something different than that.
Well, the blues can be expressed in many different ways, and especially during the time of World War II, as most of the older musicians were in Europe or Asia fighting the war, the musicians back in the United States started finding ways to play some really interesting melody lines, some of them quite complex, over the 12-bar form, and that was evolving into a school of music called bebop.
Mm-hmm.
But that was just, bebop is a continuation of all the evolution of the African American forms in jazz music that came before. I mean, it goes all the way back to Jelly Roll Morton, and maybe even, I'm sure before that. I'm not a historian by any means.
Mm-hmm.
I just hear cats. I hear cats talking about stuff. And, it's definitely a special music, and a lot of people during the course of, especially in the 20th century, became very, very good at expressing themselves through this idiom. Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, everybody from that time period.
Right. I just been transcribing my interview with Wilton Felder, the Crusaders bass player, and he passed away last weekend. I'm not sure if you knew that or not.
I did know that. I was a big fan of Wilson.
A huge monster player and great owner. Harry Lieberman back in Houston gave him an electric bass, and he taught himself how to play the electric bass on top of being a great horn player. But he was talking about doing the Midwest Gulf Coast circuit, being a backup band for guys like B.B. King and Muddy Waters, and those guys could play jazz, though. They really could play jazz tunes.
That's right.
And that to me is funny because, you read stories now about Buddy Guy, worried about the continuation of the blues, and people just have this fixation of what the blues is, but in fact, those cats had the dexterity to play jazz. They just can't. Let's play Cherokee, and they'd burn. And I think could you remember the first sort of visceral live experience of seeing a titan of a jazz guitar? We were talking about Howard Roberts, but you mentioned Wes Montgomery. First time you saw somebody live that kind of opened your mind?
Yeah, it was when I was in high school, and my guitar teacher took me over to a nearby town because somebody named Joe Venuti was playing in town, the jazz violinist,
Sure.
That was a revelation. That was a real revelation, and that cat was all over the violin. I loved it.
So, what was the revelation that he was just using it?
That's an incredible. The revelation. I was still a teenager, but this is an amazing music. It's complex, yet it's improvised every time it's played.
Mm-hmm. Right. Larry, could you tell me, it says you were born in Galveston, Texas, but where did you actually grow up?
Well, I grew up in the southeastern quadrant of the state of Washington, in a little group of 3 cities on the Columbia River, and my little city was just it was really nothing. It was just a little place on the shores of the Columbia River called Richland. But at least by the time I graduated from high school, I knew who Dave Brubeck was. Right.
And did you wind up from Washington? Did you wind up going to Seattle at all?
Yeah, that's right. That was really my first little mecca.
Because
Seattle was a mecca because I knew there was a nice, vibrant music scene there.
Can you talk about, did you ever, this is classic because one of the cats that I've gotten pretty close with is a guy named David Friesen. And I was wondering if
the bass player.
Yes, and he used to drive in a car.
Diane Cannon's brother.
Yeah, dude, I've been trying to get Diane on the program, just to talk, because I got trying to get other entertainers, but she seems to be a bit.
He's a great bass player, David Friesen.
Friesen is amazing, and he used to, when we were talking, he talked about this club called the Longolin. Did you ever play at the Longolin?
Oh, the Longolin, yeah, that was in Seattle.
Yeah, and he mentioned that you showed up there a few times. I mean, that place, can you, just for the record, I mean, you want to talk about, I'm so fascinated with these enclaves of regional music that were, before full interconnection. Pacific Northwest, could you break down the regional sound of the Pacific Northwest when you were there as best you can?
Well, I mean, I grew up in the little town there in the southeastern corner of the state. When I went to Seattle, there was more sophistication. There were clubs. There were some good players. The Longolin was started by a bass player named Jerry Heldman.
That's right.
Who I had actually, he and I worked in the same band at a place called the House of Entertainment, H-O-E, and it was called HO for short, H-O-E. And Jerry Heldman branched out and, took his own money and sunk it into this little place on University Avenue in the University District. It was like a long room. You walk in and you go all the way back, and there's a wall, and back up against that wall there was a bandstand. And he had groups there, and he organized it and ran it, and he's responsible for the development of a lot of players in the early '60s in Seattle.
Yeah, no, Friesen credits him. He had the Jerry Heldman Jazz Cafe.
That's right.
And so did you? When was the first time, if you had, did you ever get to see John Coltrane play live?
No, I mean I saw Coltrane when I moved to New York.
Okay, so you saw him live when you got to New York, but but when did you how did you wind up getting to? Did you just come to New York because it was a hot scene? How did you wind up moving there?
Well, by the end of the summer, or the middle of the summer of 1965, I had dropped out of school, and I had been playing in kind of what's known as a commercial band, but it was actually some pretty good musicians, and the gigs were pretty decent. And then I got my own gig, and I had an organ trio, but I realized I did not know anything about the music. I knew nothing about jazz music, if the truth were told. And I realized I needed to go to where the music was really happening, and I knew that was New York. So it was about 50 years ago, this past September.
Unbelievable.
I arrived in New York at the beginning of the month, and I was not disappointed. It was such an exciting scene, non-stop exciting. I was in the right place. I was hearing, in 1 week, I heard more music than I had heard in my previous 22 years.
I just want to go back to something. This is really important for younger cats or any artists in general. Truly, Larry, I realize that you didn't have a lot of live experience, and like you said, it wasn't like you were living in a metropolitan area like New York, but how did you know you didn't know anything about jazz, even though you had an organ trio?
Just all I had to do was listen to myself.
Yeah, right. And
I got a long way. I mean, people would say, "Hey, you're really good" and all that stuff, but I knew better.
Right. Right. Well, you knew you weren't up with Wes Montgomery and those cats at that point. You know, I mean,
not even close.
All right. So this is so fascinating. So Larry Coryell literally just comes into New York. You tell me, this loft scene that was percolating, maybe a couple years after you got there too.
It was happening. It was in full swing.
Right, because
when I got there.
Right, because I mean there was an apartment building where it was Carl Schroeder, Chick Corea, Dave Holland. They all lived in the same building.
This is before that.
So tell me, when you got there, the first kind of loft experience that. Like, where were you living and the kind of musician?
I lived on the Lower East Side.
Wow.
And I started finding people who were like me. They were unknown musicians that wanted to establish a career. And various people would know where the sessions were, and they would take me to them, and they were incredible. A lot of them were just totally avant-garde jam sessions where there was not a normal tune being played. It was all free. And they would last all night.
Oh, my God. This is just scintillating. This is, we got a game on this program called Name That Tune, Larry. I want to play this for you right now, and then we'll come back and talk about it, okay?
All right.
the Jake Feinberg Show, brought to you in part by the Stereo Hospital, the Circle Tree Ranch, and Abbott Taylor Jewelers, and we thank them for their support. All right, Mr. Coryell, what do you got for us, brother?
I don't know what that was. It was like R&B.
That was
Like an R&B thing with a tenor player who could play really good funk stuff. And the guitar player was trying to play like Muddy Waters, B.B. King, but it sounds like a white guy.
Right. It sounds like Larry Coryell. 1967, The Free Spirits.
That was us?
That was you playing a funky. Yeah, I'm going to send you the CD because.
What's it called?
The name of the tune. I knew you were going to go there. Rock Alarm sent me a whole bunch of Free Spirit stuff, and
who did?
Rock Alarm Bob Moses.
Oh.
And
was that Jim Pepper playing tenor?
Jim Pepper blowing his brains out. Yeah. And Chris Hills and Larry Coryell just channeling like a kind of a Jimi Hendrix almost kind of sound. I mean, it was just unbelievable. That's
interesting. I never heard that.
That's why this is why I do the show, Larry. I'm going to send you all the stuff because the stuff really, this is one of the most explosive. I think it might have. I don't know if it was a live album or not, but
that was never on an album, as far as I know.
It got pressed on CD, and I'll mail it to you as soon as I can. Yeah.
But, so Bobby gave you that?
Bobby sent it because Bobby sent me this CD, and there's I think that was called one tune was called Slum Funk. But you actually had you had to sanitize the name. It went by a different name, a dirtier name than that. But when you talk about playing free, you had cats like showing up. Maybe Woody Shaw, Jack DeJohnette, Chick Corea. Chick would be on drums. Jack DeJohnette would play bass. I just think that.
Yeah.
Can you? I mean,
that was the loft scene. That was the loft scene.
Can you talk about the impact that had on you as far as just becoming more, just being yourself? Did that kind of loose scene, playing all night, did it have an impact on not just your individual sound but your confidence as just being yourself?
Yeah, well, we were really trying to find our own voice. We were trying to find our own voice, and it sounds to me like I wonder if that was a jam session or if it was a live performance. It might have been just like we were jamming, and we just wanted to really stretch out in a very raw and primitive direction. That was very raw and primitive. I like that.
Right, and that's what when I talked to Eddie Gomez, and we were playing stuff that he did with Jeremy Steig. And you listen to the stuff that you did on some of the stuff you did on Vanguard, and it's raw, and that rawness is missing today, primarily in my mind because of several factors. Just the electronicization, the digitization of music, the drum track, the inanimate part of music, and also the idea that you could have a singer. And she says today, "How do I sound?" And the producer says, "Terrible. We can fix it." And I just, back then, imperfection was not.
Yeah, you didn't want to fix this stuff. You don't want to fix it. Leave it the way it is.
Right, but explain that philosophy, because that speaks to consciousness and expanding consciousness, and that's.
Well, it was basically we were trying to realize our true selves through music. But some of the people who didn't care for that kind of experimentation called it mockingly doing your own thing.
Yeah.
There was a little bit of polarization even back then.
How did you? But you got that. You wore that as a badge of honor, right?
Well, not so much a badge of honor. It was just what we were doing, what we wanted to do. We felt it was necessary to come at it that way.
The track we heard came off an album called Out of Sight and Sound, which was released on CD on Sunbeam Records in 2006. I wanted to ask you about the first, or could you talk about your use of psychedelic drugs and how that influenced the music that you were playing?
Well, a lot of people were taking acid and playing. I frankly, as I look back on it, one acid trip would have been enough to open the doors
right.
to perceiving music from that standpoint. But all the other acid trips were just a waste of time, as far as I'm concerned. It's a very dangerous drug, and I definitely would not recommend anybody doing it.
Did you yourself had bad experiences with it?
Well, it's you don't need it. I mean, I did what I did, and I'm glad it's over. You know, I did what I did, and I'm glad it's over. And a lot of my experiences were positive, but it's still a drug. It's still artificial. It's not really real.
Yeah, the thing is that when you moved to New York in '65, it was about as pure as it could be, and it was being made by the government, and there was no speed or strychnine in it. And to me, when you listen to this, I mean, I just know the Free Spirits. You guys were tripping hard, and the music you played was totally free. And
well, a lot of people were taking acid at that time.
I know they were. Listen, I've talked to, whether it was George Clinton or Rockalon Bob Moses or, it doesn't matter who it was, but I mean, there was this sort of lifestyle, individualistic lifestyle, living on brown rice, tuna, and LSD. And hindsight is always easy, but you're
because everybody was broke. Brown rice and vegetables, because that's all people could afford.
Were you living? So you lived in the East. Did you ever actually have a loft where you were bringing people over to play?
Yeah, occasionally they can make it up 4 flights. They'd bring their instruments and we'd jam up there.
Right.
We did our share of that, but a lot of times we went to, ours was just a cold water flat. I mean, a lot of the loft jazz, they were in buildings where there was a pretty good sized room there. It was nice sound and stuff.
How did you originally link up? I'm curious about this. Did you link up with Vanguard or Impulse first, and how did that happen?
No, I can't remember.
Yeah, I'm looking at 1966. This is the album that was sitting in my car for about a year, The Dealer with Chico. So that was on Impulse. But
yeah, that was because the only gig I could get was when Gabor Szabo was leaving Chico. He recommended to Chico that I join the band and take Gabor's place. And that was right around the time that Charlie Mariano was moving from New York to Cologne, Germany, I remember. And Chico had just moved to New York City from L.A., so there was a lot of transition going on. And Chico needed a guitar player, and I happened to be right there.
Gabor recommended you for the gig?
Yeah, Gabor recommended me for the gig. As a matter of fact, the first gig we ever did with Chico, it was Gabor. It was 2 guitars.
Oh, wow.
So Gabor was there, he was my mentor. He kind of was mentoring me into the role of the slot of being Chico's guitar player.
Did you learn anything about the, how should I say this, the jazz life from, was it the first time you had been playing with black musicians at that point?
No, I had played with a wide variety of musicians of different races in Seattle.
Can you name a few and how they?
Well, they're not really famous. One of them was named Joe Brazil. He was no longer alive.
Right.
He was from Detroit. He worked at Boeing, but he was really a great jazz tenor player. He taught me a lot of stuff. Another guy was a band leader who's still alive out there named Overton Berry. He mentored me tremendously, and he really encouraged me. I wrote my first arrangement based on his encouragement.
I'm just letting you know, Larry, we're having an unprecedented monsoon. We should be in Orlando right now. I mean, I hope we don't get disconnected because there are like huge trees being like they look like little pixie sticks in the wind right now. So I will just hang tight here. It's pretty awe-inspiring.
Oh, great. Yeah, the universe is speaking to you.
This is like Seattle. Yeah, can you talk? One of the L's on my show is leadership. You talk about being mentored by these cats, but
yeah,
what do you think about? You've been a leader quite a bit, and can you talk about some of the nuances and the qualities that you feel are essential, not just on the bandstand as a leader, but just in general, how to be a good leader in life?
Well, I mean, a good leader in life, that's an ideal. I don't think anybody fully realizes all the requirements of leadership at one particular time. I think the best you can do, you play the percentages. You know, a leader is somebody who instills confidence in himself and in the band, and who has the wisdom to make the right decisions, regardless of what the situation is.
Can you give an example of someone that you were inspired by that did something like that?
Yeah, Herbie Mann. Herbie Mann was a great band leader. He really took care of the people that he wanted to play his music. He knew how to do it, and he was a gentleman. He was a cheerleader. He was a spearheader. He would come up with ideas we could all get behind. He was able to assemble groups of people, you know, that were not seemingly that related to play together, but it worked really well because Herbie would find simple forms over which to play, and he had a lot of wisdom. He had a lot of wisdom, and he really understood music.
Can you give an example of like one of these combinations of musicians that didn't on the surface wouldn't seem that they'd be able to work together, but that he was able to?
Well, me and myself and Sonny Sharrock, two guitars in that band with a rhythm section from Muscle Shoals, Alabama, and we're playing stuff by Sam and Dave and also by Aretha.
Wait a minute.
It works beautifully.
So are you, is that the so that's the
Memphis Underground.
Memphis Underground, and you are absolutely. I did not know you were on that album.
Yeah, man. I think the best solo I ever took was on Chain of Fools on that record.
Dude, I am going to inspect that. That is fantastic. So he with Sharrock, though. I mean, how did he just was able to like go? He told you guys go towards your strengths, or was you know. One play rhythm or just listen to each. I mean, what did he do? How did he?
No, he didn't even play that. If he wanted you to play, he'd look at you.
And there were no baffles.
No.
Right. Well, we got another.
Sonny and I were soloing together at one point in "Hold On, I'm Coming." That was fantastic.
I got another piece of music here for you. Again, it is you playing, so let's take a listen to this and then we'll come back and break it down. Mr. Coryell? What do you think that is?
I never heard that before. It was just two chords.
It's just two chords. That was
Two minor chords, a whole step apart, in kind of a 6/8. And that thing at the end, I don't know what that was. It sounded like a big surfing wave on the north coast of that Hawaiian island where they have 80-foot waves.
Well,
cool.
Yeah, it was you, 1972, playing on a Wolfgang Downer album called
that was the piano player
called Knirsch. Knirsch. And Wolfgang and John Heisman and Fred Bracel, but I mean
Fred Bracel.
Okay, so I mean, like, this is what I'm talking about. I mean, you paced yourself. You just fit in to the whole flow, and then just started burning like that wave. And I'm just like, this. So take us through how you connected with the European cats. I know Wolfgang as a prolific guy on, from MPS, the German label, but Heisman, McLaughlin, Jack Bruce, all those cats. How did you get connected? Because I've never even seen this album before. I was listening to it this morning, and it's just you're raging on it.
Yeah, actually, next January, Wolfgang is going to be receiving a lifetime award from the German government. I mean, I'm going to go over there and play with him.
Oh, that's beautiful.
I'm looking forward to that. Yeah, I guess that must be from the album called Knirsch.
Knirsch, that's right. It's
pronounced Knirsch in German.
Knirsch.
Knirsch. It kind of means like a collision.
Yeah, the cover has a someone's oral someone's teeth with a bunch of wires connected to a red
the gnashing of the teeth
with somebody's red foot in there.
Right. Well, nowadays it could pass for an advertisement for the National Hockey League and the Dentists Association.
That's right. I mean, did you cut that album in Europe? Did you go over there to cut it?
Yeah, we went to Stuttgart. There was a lot of stuff going on behind Underground in Stuttgart.
How did you connect with them originally? How did you even meet him?
I don't remember. He found me. He had heard me on a record. He found me. He heard me on a record, and he wanted me to come and play on his record, and I was happy to do it. It was the beginning of my total enjoyment and respect for the European culture.
The European,
and because of him, over the last 50 years, I went all the way from being like almost an isolated American culturally to somebody who's much more aware of the entire world, especially Europe and even Russia. I mean, I'm writing my second opera. My first opera was based on Tolstoy's War and Peace, and my new opera is based on Tolstoy's Anna Karenina. And I'm getting deep into the literature of James Joyce, who I found out was a jazz guitarist. And I'm also getting deep into Indian and the forms of music in Asia that use a lot of odd meters and stuff.
You're blowing my mind. No, I want to ask you a question.
It's really good for your education, your overall education, when you embrace the jazz life.
Can you talk about why so many cats, Johnny Griffin, Dexter Gordon? Obviously you went over and culturally, your whole world expanded. I'm sure musically too. But why did so many Afro jazz cats wind up leaving for Europe?
Yeah, because people in Europe appreciated jazz more than people in America. And I'm guessing that, and it's a pretty sure guess, a lot of the cats that you mentioned, African American, black, they wanted to escape the horrible prejudice over here, because they didn't get that so much in Europe, especially in places like France.
So
when Bird went over to Europe, the first time he was over in Europe, They gave him such a great welcome. He was having such a great time. He never wanted to go back.
So I want to be clear. It was a fascination and appreciation with the art form of jazz, or there was just a lot of horrible prejudice in the States.
It was both. I mean, they were not prejudiced against black people over there, and they loved the music almost more than the Americans did. Maybe more. I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Japan too. The Japanese know so much about jazz. They know more about jazz than I do.
I know, and I wonder how much of that. I mean, this is just a stab in the dark, but after we decimated the country, after finalizing World War II, we sent all Emil Richards and Stan Kenton's big bands up and down Japan. It seemed like they got inculcated with swing jazz at that time, and
That's good.
They're more
lot better than their popular music.
I mean, they're as rabid they're more rabid than anybody. I mean, why, Larry? I'm not asking you to give a definitive answer, but why is this art form so? I don't want to say rejected, but why is it never been embraced fully in the States?
I don't know. I certainly embraced it.
Absolutely.
I had no problem embracing it once I realized what I was in for. It was an endless road of beautiful experiences in music and great people. We just lost, you just mentioned Wilkenfelder. We also lost Phil Woods recently.
We did.
Great people, great players, and it's a wonderful phenomenon that people in Europe and Asia appreciate our music, and South America. I think it's great. But more than that, I don't know what to say.
Well, no. Here's my question, though. When you were doing a lot of you were tripping out a lot, doing a lot of drugs. Did you, at a certain point, you said, I need to get myself off of this stuff? Did you have a guru? I know you're obviously very, you've poured deep into different cultural musics and you're writing operas now and things like that. But was there a crucial time where you found, when I talked to McLaughlin, he had Sri Chimnoy, Felix Cavallari from the Rascals had another cat, Carlos Santana. But it was all this push to say, I'm seeing my friends die. Okay. They're roadkill. And I am gravitating more towards the spiritual side of jazz, and I want to do it on a higher plane without drugs. Did you have somebody that helped you through that as a guru?
Not really. John and I were initiated the same night with Sri Chinmoy, and I converted Carlos maybe within a year or two later. Carlos became a very good disciple of Sri Chinmoy, also his buddy Tom Coster. But all through it all, I couldn't stop getting high. Mm-hmm. And, I missed out on the full benefit of studying yoga under Sri Chinmoy because I couldn't. The getting high thing was so fully ingrained in my life and my habits that it just kind of caused a lot of problems. And it caused many problems right up until the beginning of the 80s. And then, did you hear, I don't know if you follow baseball, but do you know who C.C. Sabathia is?
He just checked into AA, yeah.
Yeah, and it couldn't have been at a worse time for his team.
I know.
But that's kind of what it was for me. I had all these things lined up with Philip Catherine to a good agent, and we had a lot of money, and it was on the table. But that's when I reached the bottom. They call it the bottom in alcohol abuse and drug abuse. That's when I reached my bottom, and I finally made the decision on my own. I had to go away. I had gone away 4 previous times, but I really never understood what it was, how to get sober. And then this 5th time, it was really bad, and nothing else was more important. I was afraid I was going to die. if I didn't get straight.
I know. Yeah, right. No, this is,
So
yeah.
I went in 34 years ago this month, or last month. And I stuck it out, and I stayed low and didn't really do anything except focus on understanding how to get sober, and that's what happened with me. And the spirituality that branches out into things related to what Coltrane had inspired us to do by his example in the 60s, that came later for me.
Can you talk about how it came? This is so interesting, how it came to you in a latent fashion. How did it come to you latent?
Well, after I had been sober for a year, I realized I wanted to see if I could get a more Eastern orientation to my spiritual path. So I was converted to Buddhism by Herbie Hancock and Wayne Shorter.
That's pretty
And
heavy.
I've been practicing that Buddhism for 31 years. But I could not have done it if I hadn't been drug free and alcohol free. For me,
right? No,
for me, I had to be drug free, nothing, alcohol free, nothing. I remember when Bill Evans died, and we all went to a memorial service for Bill Evans somewhere in Midtown. I think it was St. Patrick's or St. something. The jazz priest, Reverend John Gensel, gave the delivery and all that stuff. But there was a buddy of mine who had come up with me in New York. As a matter of fact, I met him when I was on an acid trip. And he looked at me, because we were lamenting the fact that Bill had passed, and he looked at me and he said, Larry, you shouldn't even smoke a joint. You shouldn't take anything. Because he had to be on the receiving end of my behavior as an active addict and alcoholic. And he knew what he was talking about. And when he said that was a wake-up call, because he loves me. He was my best. We were best friends. We moved in together on 198 Eldridge Street on the 4th floor Coldwater flat to start our lives. Him as an engineer, he ended up becoming the most famous jazz engineer in Japan. David Baker was his name.
Wow.
And I was trying to get the free spirits off the ground.
So he knew at that. He said, "Don't even smoke a joint." Just
yeah. He said you should. He'd been around me long enough to see that I was one of those people who should not take anything. He was right. See, I couldn't see that because most of my life I totally was involved in music.
It's amazing.
And all I thought about was music.
How did you? I mean, to me, that was the crux of it was. I mean, people are already sort of talking about Sabathia, like why something terrible must have happened, and for him to come out, the timing is so bad. Why couldn't he have done this in a much more personal way after the playoff game? But
it doesn't work that way.
But exactly,
everybody has their own.
No, I want to ask, but this is my question for you.
They're writing their own story of their life, whether they realize it consciously or not. And I mean, look at his stats this year. His stats are terrible. It was obvious the cat needs, because you can't. In my opinion, very few people can just quit with willpower when they realize that they have to make it's a major thing. It's a lifestyle, just like getting high and drinking was a lifestyle. Sober is a lifestyle. It's a whole other. It's different.
How did you? How
did I do it?
No, my question is, tell me about Philip Catherine's reaction, because you said there was a ton of money and opportunities on the table.
Well, he was not happy, but he understood eventually. A few years later, we're great friends now. He understood. That's what I needed.
I got one more clip here. It's called "Name That Voice." I've interviewed over 500 cats. I want you to see if you can identify this person talking about you, and we'll come back and break it down.
Okay.
How year having Coryell was, and maybe you could talk a little bit for the record what he was doing prior to guys like Hendrix and prior to guys like Sonny Chirac, what he was doing that was so progressive on the guitar.
Well, he's had an incredibly wide range, and those days too, like a very intense cat. The way he played, I think he's you know, he's playing greater than ever. He's mellower now. I saw him recently. He's very mellow. He should, you know, why not? 70 years old, I think. But in those days, man, this cat was like ferocious, man, and really living on the edge, playing on the edge, you know. But his guitar playing had a really wide range because he's really the only guitar player I knew who had all the folk stuff down. He played Dylan and the band tunes and all these beautiful folk stuff, folk guitar, blues, rock, killing on that stuff, country stuff, as well as like he had that kind of Wes Montgomery straight ahead thing. That's pretty much as good as any of the guitar players I heard around that time. And at the same time also could go out, could get free, start doing the feedback, hump the amp. So that's a wide range. There's one tune on the record I did called Love Animal called Dancing Bears. Man, that's Coryell is on another planet. Him and Pepper plays.
All right, brother. Who is that?
Well, you know who that is. It's Bobby Moses.
It's Bobby Moses. Dancing Bears. He just referenced the Free Spirits album again. Yeah.
Well, that Dancing Bear was on his record.
Coryell, you're not going to, for Moses to shower you with that kind of praise, that you were the dexterity of your playing cannot be understated, especially because it came prior to the power rock jazz trios of Cream and Hendrix. I want this to be very clear for the record that you were before them.
Yeah, well, I was doing my thing over here, and I think right around that time Hendrix was in England. And Clapton came over. I remember one time Clapton came over, and I forget who he was playing with. It might have been with the Cream. But then they went down to the Cafe A Go-Go and jammed, and they were up there, they were jamming away, and I just stormed on the stage and just went nuts. and Eric was taken aback. Those are the days. Bobby's right, man. I was on the edge.
Right,
definitely on the edge.
But did you get a chance to ever hang out with or play with the band or Dylan?
I almost did. I never got. I was trying so hard to play with Dylan.
Yeah.
But Mike Bloomfield got the gig, and right around that time, just a little bit after that, was when Gary Burton wanted to start his group, and he came to see the Free Spirits, and he made a proposal. That the band was going to be Roy Haynes and Steve Swallow, and I really couldn't turn that down.
No, did he offer you like he said you'll play on at least 2 albums, or I'll take you on the road, or
everything. He wanted to start a major group composed of young players.
Right. Well, that's about the heaviest. It was the Tong Funeral and the all those wild, tripped out albums with you and Haynes and Swallow.
Gary Burton was I don't know what the right adjective, the kind of musician and his musical. He was a prodigious musician. He was the kind of guy like a few years before George Shearing had hired him, and there was going to be a record date like on a Friday, and Thursday night Gary stayed up for a few hours extra and composed and arranged a whole bunch of music and brought it into the studio the next day, and they all played it right there on the spot. Really like very Mozartian in his ways. Mozart was known as being a perfect sight reader. He never needed an eraser because every note he wrote on the paper was correct. Gary had a lot of that in him.
Before I let you go, Larry, I just wanted to ask you about your, you continue to produce, maybe you're not humping the amp or doing feedback the way you were at one time, but can you talk about your concept of love and how you bring love to people in your life?
Well, to me, love is very simple and almost anticlimactic. For me, my personal experience, Love simply means to really care about another person. No more, no less. And I think there's nothing extraordinary about it. We're all capable of that. I think the real problem is evolving towards that capability and evolving into that capability where you become the kind of person that really cares about other people.
When did you turn that? When did you turn that corner of evolution?
Oh, I don't know. I think when I got sober, I started going in that direction, but I'm not there yet. It's something you have to work at it. In my experience, you have to work at it because I'm highly motivated as an artist. I'm highly motivated to succeed and do different things. I mean, this second opera I'm doing is scaring me. It's what's coming out is totally unexpected. I'm at the wedding of Levin and Dolly, and I ended up making the orchestra sound like a pipe organ. I was just before you called, I was looking at it, seeing if I needed to add any more parts to that section. But I found a really good vehicle for the things I like to do. The operatic form is very attractive to me. I love straight ahead jazz. I love the kind of fusion that we started all those years ago, and that's evolved into many, many different things now. When you get bands that can really cross over the line between funk and bebop, well, there's not that much. I think fusion is coming back in the sense that the way bebop came back in the late '60s, early '70s. All of a sudden, by the middle of the '70s, the big headliners were like Woody Shaw and Stan Getz and Dizzy. That all came back. I think fusion is coming back, especially the 11th House. Return to Forever also already did a great couple of tours. And the 11th House is headlining at the Jimi Hendrix birthday this year in New York in November.
Oh wow!
And we just got a slot at the Coryell Jazz Festival in Finland in July, and we had a 1-week stint at the Bruno where we played the music from 1973, and it sounded like it sounded totally contemporary.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's where my pocket is the early '70s, and I feel that music holds up better today than it did then. And if there is a renaissance, I sure as heck want to be around for it at 37. But I think it also it cannot be understated that you grew up in a time when there was a record industry, and it has shrunk now to a business. And the record industry allowed for you to develop individual personalities, whether it was albums.
That's right.
All right,
that's true, and I'm thankful for that.
Right, and so what I'm saying is you can talk about a comeback, but the comeback comes through individual characters and entertainers, and it's hard now to cut through because of the YouTube era that we are now living through, as opposed to, like I said, literally the Gambler or the Chico album without the vinyl in it was sitting in my car, and I could look on the back and see you with corduroy pants, no shoes, leaning back, and there was Larry Coryell, and there you jumped off the page and became an individual. So your sons, I know, are very involved with music, and I know that they're successful with it, but they're dealing with a different animal now. It is not an industry the way it was. But any renaissance, I think you guys are the ones to pass on that knowledge through your own language. And
That's right.
Hey, before one more thing, did you ever do any music concrete, and did you ever play with Moondog?
I love Moondog. I never played with him. And I don't know what concrete is.
That's like recording some kind of electronic sounds or noises, and then putting it into a live setting. I know, like Roger Kellaway had a gig at the library, a library in New York, and he put headphones on.
Oh yeah, you know who I did that with? I did that in Stuttgart with at a live concert with Wolfgang Downer. It was fantastic.
Oh my! So you put
he had all these synthesizer ideas blasting at us from all four corners of the room.
Yeah,
Great.
yeah. Well, I mean, and yeah. I listen, man. I had a ball. I hope we can do part 2 when you're ready to release that bear of an opera. We can do maybe a part 2.
Anytime you're ready, brother.
All the best.
Really enjoyed the interview.
Much love, Larry. We'll talk. I'll get you a copy of this as soon as possible. Okay.
My back at you, brother.
All right. Be good.
All right, peace.
Peace. This is the Jake Feinberg Show, and we'll see you all in a little bit.